Keanu Reeves represents something rare in our world, a person who carries immense fame yet walks through life with genuine humility. What moves me most about him is not his success as an actor, but the quiet ways he transforms pain into purpose. After losing his daughter and the love of his life, he could have become bitter, but instead, he chose to pour kindness into the world through anonymous donations to children's hospitals and countless acts of unseen generosity. He reminds us that true strength is not about being invincible, but about choosing compassion even when life has given you every reason to close your heart. His story teaches us that the most powerful people are often those who use their influence to lift others without seeking recognition. The morning light felt different in Alexandra Grant's studio that day, softer somehow, as if carrying a secret through the tall windows. She stood perfectly still, her coffee growing cold in her hands while something unnamed stirred in her chest, a feeling she had learned to recognize over 7 years but could never quite capture in words. The white orchids would arrive today, March 15th, just as they had every year since she had almost given up on her art, and the anticipation always made the air feel charged with possibility. Her fingers traced the edge of her worktable where paint stains told stories of late nights and early mornings, of dreams nearly abandoned and somehow found again. Every year for 7 years, the same florist delivered the same stunning arrangement of white orchids to her studio door. And every year the note said the same thing in careful handwriting, for the art that saved a stranger. Alexandra had tried everything to discover who sent them, calling the florist countless times only to be met with polite refusal, visiting in person to plead her case, even offering to pay double the flower's worth just for a name. But the answer remained locked behind an ironclad confidentiality agreement. The mystery had become part of her artistic journey, transforming from a curious puzzle into something deeper, something that spoke to the invisible threads connecting human lives. She had begun painting the orchids each year, capturing not just their delicate beauty but the emotions they carried, creating a series she called Anonymous Grace. The paintings had gained unexpected attention in the art world, with collectors drawn to the story behind them, to the idea that somewhere in the vast city of Los Angeles, someone remembered her work with such devotion that they marked it with flowers year after year. Alexandra moved through her studio, preparing her easel for this year's painting, when her assistant knocked and entered with an envelope. "The charity auction needs your final confirmation for next week," she said, and Alexandra nodded absently, her mind still on the orchids that would arrive within hours. The auction would feature her Anonymous Grace series, all 7 paintings together for the first time, and though part of her felt like she was letting go of a precious secret, she knew the proceeds would help fund art programs for underprivileged youth. As noon approached, Alexandra found herself standing by the window, watching the street below for the familiar delivery van. She thought about the stranger who sent these flowers, wondered if they were happy, if they were healthy, if they knew how much their gesture had meant during her darkest days. 7 years ago, she had been nobody, painting in obscurity, teaching art classes to pay rent, questioning whether her voice mattered in a world already full of artists. The first bouquet had arrived just 3 days after she had packed up her brushes, ready to pursue a more practical career, and something about that note, about being seen by someone she could not see, had given her the courage to continue. The doorbell rang at exactly 12:30, and Alexandra's heart jumped as it always did. She signed for the delivery, hands trembling slightly as she carried the orchids to her work table. This year's arrangement was even more beautiful than the last, the white petals seeming to glow in the afternoon light, and tucked among them was the familiar note with the same message that had become her anchor. As she set up her canvas to begin painting, her phone buzzed with a text from the auction coordinator. "We have an anonymous bidder very interested in your Anonymous Grace series, asking if the artist will attend." Alexandra smiled at the irony, one anonymous soul interested in art about another anonymous soul. She confirmed she would be there, not knowing that this auction would finally unlock the 7-year mystery, that the quiet man who would bid from the back of the room carried a story that would change everything she thought she knew about art, about kindness, and about the ways we save each other without ever knowing it. The Beverly Hills Gallery hummed with quiet conversations and clinking champagne glasses, but Alexandra Grant felt the energy shift the moment she entered the room for the charity auction. Something in the atmosphere made her pause at the threshold, a strange recognition of significance that she could not name, as if the universe had been arranging pieces on a board, and tonight they would finally move. The Anonymous Grace series hung illuminated on the main wall, 7 paintings telling 7 years of mystery, and seeing them together for the first time made her breath catch in her throat. She moved through the crowd of collectors and philanthropists, accepting compliments with gracious smiles, yet her attention kept drifting to a feeling that tonight held more than just a sale. Near the back of the room, a man in a simple black suit stood studying her paintings with an intensity that made other viewers unconsciously give him space. Keanu Reeves had not planned to come to this auction, had actually been heading home from a film set when something made him turn his car around, a pull he recognized from years of following instincts he could not explain. The paintings on the wall were not just art to him. They were chapters of a story he knew intimately, though the artist had no idea of his connection to her work. As the auctioneer began describing the Anonymous Grace series, emphasizing the mysterious yearly flowers that inspired them, Keanu found himself gripping the auction paddle tighter than necessary. Alexandra watched from the side as bidding started at $50,000, quickly climbing as 2 collectors battled for the collection. She noticed the quiet man in the back had not raised his paddle yet, though his eyes never left the paintings, and something about his stillness made her curious. When the bidding reached $200,000, one collector dropped out, leaving just one bidder who looked confident in victory. Then the man in the back raised his paddle, doubling the current bid to $400,000, and the room fell silent. Alexandra felt her heart skip, not because of the amount, but because of the way he looked at her paintings, as if they held answers to questions he had carried for years. The other bidder raised to $450,000, and without hesitation, the quiet man bid $600,000, ending the auction with a finality that suggested he would have paid anything. As people dispersed for the reception, Alexandra found herself walking toward the mysterious high bidder, drawn by something beyond mere gratitude. "Thank you for your incredible generosity," she said when she reached him, and Keanu Reeves looked up with eyes that held depths of stories untold. "Your paintings mean more to me than you could know," he replied, his voice soft but weighted with emotion. "They remind me that art can be medicine for souls that hospitals cannot heal." Alexandra felt the words settle into her chest like pieces of a puzzle she had been trying to solve. She found herself telling him about the flowers, about the 7 years of mystery, about how they had arrived at her lowest moment and kept coming like clockwork. As she spoke, she watched something change in his expression, a recognition that went beyond polite interest. And when she mentioned the note that always came with them, for the art that saved a stranger, his hand moved unconsciously to his chest as if protecting something precious. Keanu looked at her paintings again, then back at her, seeming to weigh words carefully before speaking. 7 years ago, someone very close to me was fighting a battle that medicine alone could not win, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They found strength in a painting, an unsigned piece in a small gallery that showed light breaking through absolute darkness. It was dated March 15th, and they carried a photo of it through 2 years of treatment, looking at it every morning like some people look at prayers. Alexandra felt the blood drain from her face as memories flooded back. A painting she had created on March 15th 7 years ago, sold to a small gallery for barely enough to cover her rent, unsigned because she had not yet found the confidence to claim her work. The connection was forming in her mind, but seemed too extraordinary to voice, and she found herself afraid to ask the question that would either solve her mystery or shatter an impossible hope. Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn photograph, edges soft from handling, showing a painting Alexandra recognized immediately as her own work. "My sister Kim wanted me to find the artist and thank them," he said, but the gallery had no record of who created it, only the date it was painted. The room seemed to spin around Alexandra as the 7-year mystery began to unravel. But before she could respond, Keanu was already walking away, leaving her with the photograph and a promise to have the paintings delivered tomorrow, along with one more story that needed to be told. The photograph in Alexandra's hand trembled as she stood alone in the gallery after Keanu had left, the worn edges telling stories of countless moments when someone had held it like a lifeline. She recognized her own brushstrokes in the image, remembered the night she had painted it with tears streaming down her face, pouring her own struggle with purpose into every stroke of light against darkness. The security guard was turning off lights, suggesting she should leave, but her legs felt unable to move as 7 years of mystery began assembling into a truth more profound than she had imagined. That night, Alexandra could not sleep, sitting in her studio surrounded by the returned anonymous Grace paintings while holding the photograph Keanu had given her. At 3 in the morning, her phone rang with an unknown number, and somehow she knew who it would be before she answered. "I need to tell you the complete story," Keanu's voice said quietly, "and if you are willing, Kim would like to meet you tomorrow morning at the overlook near Griffith Observatory." The dawn was just beginning to paint the Los Angeles sky when Alexandra arrived at the overlook, finding Keanu standing beside a woman whose eyes held the kind of light that only comes from surviving darkness. Kim Reeves looked younger than her years, but carried herself with the gravity of someone who had walked through fire and chosen to see it as transformation rather than destruction. When she saw Alexandra, tears immediately filled her eyes, and without words, she pulled the artist into an embrace that felt like coming home to a place Alexandra had never known existed. Kim began her story as they sat on a bench watching the city wake below them, her voice steady despite the weight of memory. 7 years ago, the doctors had given me 6 months, maybe 8 if the treatment worked, but they could not promise quality of life, only quantity of days. I was 32 years old, lying in a hospital bed, feeling like my body had betrayed me and my spirit was following close behind. Keanu had flown in from filming, sitting beside my bed day and night, but we both knew that love alone could not cure what was destroying me from within. On what we thought might be my last good day, Keanu wheeled me to a small gallery near the hospital, just to feel normal for an hour, to pretend we were ordinary siblings looking at art instead of saying goodbye. Kim paused, reaching for Alexandra's hand as she continued. "Your painting was in the corner, almost hidden, and I could not explain why it called to me, but something in the way light broke through that darkness spoke directly to what I was feeling. It was not false hope or empty optimism. It was honest about the darkness but insistent about the light, and I needed that truth more than I needed comfort." Keanu picked up the story, his voice thick with emotion as he remembered those days. Kim insisted on buying the painting, but she was too weak to take it home, so she asked for a photograph instead. Every morning during chemo, during radiation, during the days when she could barely open her eyes, she would look at that photo first thing. The nurses started calling it her talisman, and one doctor said he had never seen someone fight with such quiet determination, as if she had made a promise to someone and refused to break it. "The painting became my North Star," Kim said, "and I told myself that if I survived, we would find the artist and thank them for creating something that gave me strength when my own had run out." But the gallery had paid cash, had no records, and the painting was unsigned. So Keanu hired investigators, contacted art experts, searched for 7 years without success. Then last month, I was at an art therapy training session when someone mentioned the anonymous Grace series, showed me an article about Alexandra Grant and her mysterious flowers, and when I saw the painting style, I knew immediately it was the same artist. Alexandra could barely speak through her tears as she understood the full weight of what had unfolded. "You mean the flowers, the 7 years of orchids, they were from you both," marking each year Kim survived beyond what doctors predicted. Keanu nodded, explaining how they had chosen March 15th, the date on her painting, as their day of gratitude, their way of honoring the unknown artist who had unknowingly become part of their family's survival story. "But there is something more," Kim said, standing up with new energy in her movements. "The story does not end with my survival, because your art did not just save me, it showed me my purpose." Alexandra looked between the siblings, sensing another revelation approaching, and Kim smiled with the joy of someone about to share a precious secret. "Tomorrow, I want to show you what your painting helped create, something that has already changed hundreds of lives, something that proves that art is not just decoration but medicine for the soul. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Cedars-Sinai Hospital as Alexandra followed Kim and Keanu through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and hope intertwined. Kim stopped at a door marked the Orchid Foundation Art Therapy Center, and when she opened it, Alexandra gasped at what lay beyond. The room bloomed with color and life, walls covered in paintings created by patients, easels stationed beside treatment chairs, and in the center, displayed with honor, hung her original unsigned painting from 7 years ago, the one that had started everything. Children and adults worked side by side with art therapists, some with Roman IV drips attached to their arms but paintbrushes steady in their hands, creating worlds where their illness did not define them. Kim explained that after her recovery, she had trained as an art therapist, using her experience to help others find what she had found in Alexandra's painting, not false promises of cure but genuine moments of transcendence, spaces where the spirit could soar even when the body struggled. A young boy of maybe 10 years old approached Alexandra shyly, holding a painting of a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Miss Kim says you are the one who painted the light picture," he said, "and I wanted to show you mine because it helps me be brave for my treatments tomorrow." Alexandra knelt beside him, tears flowing freely as she recognized her own journey reflected in his young eyes, the same desperate need to create beauty in the face of fear, to insist on light even when darkness felt overwhelming. Keanu watched from the doorway as his sister explained how the foundation had grown from 1 room to 12 locations across California, how they had funded it initially with his anonymous donations, but it had become self-sustaining through the very auction where Alexandra's paintings had sold. "We never wanted recognition," Kim said, "because the most powerful kindness is the kind that expects nothing in return, that exists purely because someone else needs it to exist." As they toured the facility, meeting patients whose lives had been touched by art therapy, Alexandra began to understand that her mystery had never been just about flowers or anonymous admirers. It had been about the invisible threads that connect human souls across time and space, about how one moment of creation born from pain could ripple outward in ways the creator never imagined. Every painting on these walls was a testament to resilience, a declaration that beauty and meaning could exist even in the hardest moments of human experience. Kim led them to a quiet room where she pulled out a thick album, its pages filled with letters and photographs from patients over the years. "These are the real flowers," she said softly, "the lives that bloomed because someone dared to create art that told the truth about suffering while insisting on the possibility of transcendence." Alexandra read through stories of children who had found courage, adults who had rediscovered purpose, families who had learned to hold both grief and gratitude simultaneously. As the day drew to a close, Keanu made a proposition that would change Alexandra's path forever. "We want you to be the founding artistic director of our expansion, to help us bring this to every cancer center in America, not as charity, but as essential care, recognizing that healing involves more than just treating the body." Alexandra accepted without hesitation, understanding that her 7-year mystery had been preparing her for this moment, teaching her that the greatest art is not what hangs in galleries, but what lives in hearts. 1 year later, on March 15th, Alexandra stood before a crowd at the national launch of the Orchid Foundation, with Kim and Keanu beside her. She told the complete story for the first time publicly, from her unsigned painting created in despair to the mysterious flowers that kept her creating, from the auction revelation to the discovery of Kim's survival, from anonymous kindness to visible impact. The audience wept openly as she explained how art had saved both creator and viewer without either knowing of the other's existence. Kim took the microphone next, her voice strong and clear as she shared what 8 years of borrowed time had taught her. "We live in a world that measures worth by fame and fortune, but the most profound impacts often come from anonymous acts of creation and kindness. Alexandra's painting saved me not because it was signed by someone famous, but because it was honest, because someone had poured their truth into it without knowing who might need that truth to survive another day." Keanu spoke last, his words simple but profound, explaining why he had chosen to remain anonymous for 7 years. "Real kindness is not performed for applause, but planted like seeds in secret, trusting that something beautiful will grow even if we never see the garden. Every flower we sent was a reminder that Alexandra's art mattered, that creativity born from struggle could become medicine for others, that the smallest acts of beauty create ripples across eternity. This story teaches us that our actions, especially our creative expressions born from genuine emotion, travel farther than we can imagine. Alexandra's unsigned painting, created in a moment of personal darkness, became a beacon of hope for someone she had never met. The anonymous flowers that sustained her artistic spirit came from gratitude so deep it needed no recognition. We learn that kindness does not require an audience, that the most powerful connections often happen without our knowledge, and that art is not luxury but necessity, not decoration but medicine for souls navigating difficulty. Kim's transformation from patient to healer shows us that our struggles can become our purpose, that surviving is just the beginning of thriving. Keanu's 7-year commitment to anonymous gratitude reminds us that true strength lies not in being seen, but in seeing others, in honoring the light they bring without needing credit for recognizing it. Ultimately, this story proves that we are all connected by invisible threads of impact and influence, that every act of creation or kindness sends ripples through the world, touching lives in ways we may never know. The Orchid Foundation stands as testament to what happens when anonymous kindness finally reveals itself, not for glory, but for multiplication, creating systems where healing through art becomes possible for thousands who need beauty to remind them that even in illness, even in fear, the human spirit can create, connect, and transcend.